Hey, if you are listening to this, why the heck have you not signed up for a call with me? Yes, you. I want to know why. If you are having a problem parenting your teenagers or enjoying parenting your teenagers or young adults, and it's the same problem you had last week, then why aren't you giving me a call? We can just get it taken care of. Maybe it's because you're thinking it's not a big deal. And maybe it's not. But still, wouldn't it be better to not keep having that same problem over and over? Or maybe you're thinking, Allie's so nice and I'm so cranky about this problem. Like, I'm not going to bother her with my stupid problems. I should be able to handle this myself. And what I want to offer you is there's no shame in not being able to figure out the right, thing to do next. When you and I are on the phone, I'm listening to all the little bits of your story that you say, but you are not hearing yourself say anymore. You've, in effect, gone deaf to those bits. Effectively, they're like blind spots. And I will hear all of those because I haven't been ruminating. I haven't been thinking about this problem for weeks on end. I'll hear it with fresh ears. I'll hear all the thoughts that you're thinking that you believe are facts when that is not true at all. I will help you have a little wiggle room and, some new ways to think about those things. So if you're listening to these podcasts and having trouble putting them into action with your family, absolutely take me up on these calls. They're free, they're fantastic, and you're going to feel so good having support so that you have someone in your corner to help you decide what's best for your family. Because there is no one right way to parent. And that's why generic advice that you are pulling off the internet does not work. You need specific advice that is specific to your family. And that is where I come in. And it's also the topic of this week's podcast.
Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
I have been reading a ton of research papers. And the question that I was looking at that took me down this particular rabbit hole is, what does research say is the best parenting style? When you look at the research, there are roughly 4 different parenting styles, and that's what we're going to talk about today. These 4 styles are different than the way that we typically talk about parenting styles. The list that we hear about most often is dance mom, hockey mom, band mom, tiger mom, helicopter mom, free range parents. That list goes on and on. But when you break those all down and when you look at the academic research, what you see is even those styles roughly fall into 4 basic categories. Okay, those 4 categories are authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and neglectful. And those 4 styles are based on 2 basic parenting characteristics. And those 2 characteristics are control and warmth. And I think this is super interesting because the majority of parenting advice out there is really along the axis of control. It's about how do you get your kids to do their homework? How do you get them to not be on their screens all the time? How do you get them to be more responsible drivers or kinder to their family members? Okay, all of those are the axis of control. And I don't want you to get too caught up on the language because control has kind of a bad connotation to it. But at its core, what we're trying to do is control our kids' behavior to get them to do certain things that we think will make them more successful both academically and, work ethic and even socially. And control has a bunch of other labels like restriction, supervision, demandingness, high standards. There's a lot of different names for it. But when you boil those all down, they kind of fall under that word control. The other axis is warmth. And there isn't a ton of advice out there about warmth as a parent. I think that category is assumed, and it is true. We love our kids. But how we convey that love, I do think that there could be more advice out there. So, warmth and control. Then we go to the parenting styles that are based on a balance of those two components. So authoritarian is high control and low warmth. Authoritative is high control and high warmth. Permissive is low control and high warmth. And neglectful is low control, low warmth. Okay, another word for permissive is indulgent. That's another, I saw that labeled a bunch of places too. In United States parenting literature, it's generally accepted, like most of the parenting literature, hews towards the idea that authoritative, that's the high control, high warmth, is the mystical unicorn state of successful parenting that everyone should be moving towards. And this is where I think it gets really interesting, because this is the more category. More love, more structure, more freedom, more expectations. Okay, because it's both high control and high warmth. Whatever problem you're having, people think that you need more of something. And our perceptions of whether or not a parent is high control or high warmth depends completely on where we stand. Okay, this is what I was starting to talk about when I mentioned communication. We perceive someone as being high control when they are equally strict or stricter than we are. So whatever we're doing, if they're doing it more, we think they're high in that area, whether or not they are. So if you take, for example, a helicopter mom, the actual definition of a helicopter mom is not someone who is overly focused on their children. It's someone who's more focused on their children than I am. Okay, because one person's helicopter mom is not like it's another person's neglectful mom, depending on like how much attention they think you should be spending on your kids. And I'm laughing a little bit here. How do I know this to be true from personal lived experience? I have lived all over the country with my kids, many, many different communities. And let me tell you, expectations of parental involvement vary greatly. Okay, what was totally chill in one area of the country, maybe even seen as not that involved, and another area of the country is seen as over-involved. And I have personally experienced that. And it's true even within families. You know, you may think that your sister-in-law is nutty about how involved she is in all of her kids' stuff. And she might think that you're neglectful. Okay, it's all based on where we stand, how we see other people. So this magical balance of high control and high warmth is going to vary by families as well. Your rules, your standards, your involvement, your conversations, the things that you talk about, how you are willing to be talked to, all of that is personal to your family. There is no national board of good families that's going to come and certify your parenting as the right balance of those two elements. And they surveyed the kids and they surveyed the parents. And the kids' idea of how their parents were was different than the parents' idea of how they were, like, you know, when they looked within families. And again, I know this to be true in my own family. My kids thought I was authoritarian, where I thought I was authoritative. And my friends thought I was permissive, where I thought it was authoritative. So just even in my little culture, in my family and my friends, people had very different ideas about the choices I was making as parents. It's all subjective. This is where I think it gets even more interesting, is not only is how we are as parents subjective, but even the best kind of parenting culture to have is subjective. So that magical unicorn style of parenting, of authoritative, that is only broadly true for European American middle-class families. When you look at other subcultures within the United States and cultures outside of the United States, the parenting styles that most people think is like the right parenting style for their family, that varies. So among Chinese Americans, Hispanic Americans, and African Americans, as well as Arab societies outside of America, they tend to believe, again, these are broad generalizations, that the authoritarian style is the best style. Okay, that's high on control, low on warmth. In Latin American countries, so not Latin Americans, but Latin American countries and European countries, those cultures believe that the permissive style, the high warmth, low control, is best. Isn't that wild? We have data that shows there isn't one right way to parent. Like, if there was, then everyone in the United States would think that the same style of parenting was best. And that is absolutely not true. And there's data that shows that it's not true. And I don't want you to listen to this and think like, oh, I'm this kind of family, so I should adopt this kind of parenting style. No, I want you to use this information to feel validated in hewing to the style that works for you and your family. Okay, that was my takeaway when I brought all this data, because I fall higher on the warmth scale. I am a golden retriever of a human. And these studies validated for me that I didn't do it the wrong way by parenting in a style that works for me. Okay, and that is the bulk of the work that I do with parents, is helping them discover their own style, the style that works for them and their families. Even between my two children, like, I parented in slightly different ways, both in ways that felt true and good to me, but slightly different because they needed slightly different things. So finding the style that works for you, then you can loop into your own wisdom more quickly, okay? And don't think that you should automatically know what your style is, because we live in a parenting culture that has a lot of views about what moms should do. We have data that shows there isn't one right way to parent. And so I want your takeaway. I have a couple of takeaways. One, whatever style someone, including your kids, think you are is based on how they are. Okay, there are no objective measures. So if your kids are thinking you're too controlling, that doesn't necessarily mean you're too controlling. Okay, that is their perception of how you are. And like I said, next week we're going to talk about some communication things that I think were totally disregarded in these other studies. But just know that how anyone else feels about what you're doing, like, that is based on how they are, where they stand. Of course, your kids are going to think you're too controlling. Like, they would like to have there be no rules. Okay, so don't worry about that. 2, there is no ideal style. Even big picture, different cultures can't agree on a single best style. So you can use that to have a little bit of freedom and parenting in the way that works for you. And that is really my third takeaway. I found these studies hugely validating, because I was often told when my kids were growing up that I was too much of this or not enough of that, and, I should do these other things, I should be tougher, I shouldn't. And just knowing that there isn't one right way to be, I hope that is also hugely comforting to you. And truly, that is the bulk of the work that I do with parents. I will help you feel good about the style that works for you, the style that works for your family. And don't think that you should automatically know what that is. We're going to have to dig a little bit to get to that, because we're parenting in a culture that has a lot of views about how we should be and what we should do. And half of those views contradict with the other half of those views. And as women, we're socialized to look outside of ourselves for the right answers. And so what I will help you do is to turn that focus back into your own maternal wisdom. We talked about that. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to that episode. It's fantastic. And it talks about how our maternal instincts aren't something that we're born with, but something that we develop over years and years and years of being the mother to our particular children. And that maternal instinct is so deep and so beautiful. It's such a database that we can access. And that reveals our particular parenting style. I want you to believe in your fundamental goodness enough to develop the confidence to just, let people have their thoughts about how things should be. Let your kids have their thoughts about how things should be. I want you to rest safe and secure in your knowledge that your particular style of parenting is serving your family. Have a great week, everyone.